Okay, everybody, I'm hearing a lot of great discussion. I think we should open it up to the class. So from the video, there was a question about what a homunculus is. Has anybody ever heard that term before? Yeah, a few people. Nobody else? We can turn this off. And so what I was telling Diana back there is the idea of the homunculus is like, it's like a no-go zone. Don't go there. It doesn't make sense. Historically, there's always been a question of like, what's going on here? And like for people 500 years ago who had no access to an MRI, who didn't know what brain waves were, who didn't know what neurons were, who didn't have great YouTube videos that explained all of these things, or tried to, people tried to understand like, what is it that's directing us? There's this idea that we have a soul. There's this idea that everything is divine intervention or whatnot. But then there was like a more serious analysis of what's going on here. There's input that's coming into our brains, lines and edges, which build into people, concepts, objects, all of these things. But then who's making the determination as to what happens with it, right? And so people theorize like, oh, maybe there's a part of your brain that is like this executive. We look out into the world, we see the organization of people, systems, objects, and usually there's some conductor, or sometimes in a hierarchy, there's some conductor that's bringing in all the information and dictating what's happening. That's basically the idea of the homunculus. And so different people, different theories, different schools of thought believed that, but now we live in a world where we think, okay, this part of your brain is responsible for language processing. This part of your brain is responsible for cortisol arousal or stress arousal. There's a particular part of the brain that's processing information. So we don't think about the brain in terms of like this thing. But a big part of cognitive science and psychology was like trying to understand like what's actually happening, and people were trying to move away from this fanciful idea of there's just a part of your brain that controls everything, that there's this little man. And so the homunculus conversation was supposed to be pejorative. We know what that word means? Negative. It's supposed to be derogatory. If I say you think that there's a homunculus in my brain, I'm basically saying you're not scientific. You believe in some crazy mythology about what's going on. You're not applying science correctly. So when B.F. Skinner's responding to this claim that, I forget exactly what the specific claim was, but he makes the claim that behaviorism dehomunculates man. What he's saying is, if we start to look at the brain in terms of there being some structure, some innate thing that governs how we act in the world, if we try to ascribe some structure to that, we're kind of creating an executive. Now, I don't really agree with that position because the cognitivists are not saying that there is an inherent structure that we listen to. There's just an inherent structure in our brain that processes information. But one of Skinner's defenses was that behaviorism, because behaviorism is just interested in looking at the world and the stimulus, we all know what I mean by stimulus, right? Light, touch, auditory information, words, whatever. Because we're not doing that, we're avoiding this question entirely. So they try to answer the question by avoiding the question. And I don't think we think that that is an appropriate way to deal with problems, right? Maybe in our personal lives, but not in science. Yeah? Okay. Any other points from last class? Or from the videos that you guys talked about that you thought was interesting? Anything? We also watched the video about how AI, was it learns or reasons? I can't remember which video I shared. What was the title? AI, how AI reasons? Learns. How AI learns. Okay. Anybody learn anything from that?
What about tic-tac-toe and chess?
Right. Okay. And why do you think that matters? Or do we not think, or do we just think, why the hell am I watching this?
I think it's easy to create like sort of a structure of the world, like a sort of mini physical model when you're confined by the rules of a game.
Right. Right. Perfect. So we're going to get into this a little bit, but when you're trying to like model something, who here has been in an economics class? Who here has been in a physics class? Those are the only two that I know. I don't know what other ones, but like in physics and economics, before you engage in any modeling, which is to predict things, like I'm going to predict whether you're going to buy something or not, or I'm going to predict how a box moves when it's pressed up against another object. You have to make assumptions, and these assumptions dictate what happens in the model. It's the logic, right? It's a set of facts that we're like going to build off of. And so the point about games, I think I want to draw like a very clear parallel here. An AI trying to play a game is the exact same setup as a human being trying to play the game of hide and seek. Like that's why I put those two there. I probably could have done a better job explaining that connection. My original intention was to create a second half of that video that explains more closely the AI stuff, but I didn't have time for that, so I had to supplement with another video. But the idea is a human being engaged in this game of hide and seek where I see objects, I see doors, I see whatever. I'm trying to solve a problem. When an AI is trying to play a game, they're trying to solve a problem. It's about the task. The difference that I want us to take away from here is that the inputs that an AI gets are radically different from the inputs that we get. Why? Because the architecture in the AI system is designed to identify small features, certain types of features that work with its architecture. We didn't get into the architecture of AI systems because that's not what this class is. But for us, we process information in a radically different way, right? AIs don't construct the same base structures, lines, edges, auditory sound, whatever. They can process it, but they don't do it in the same way. That means they perform differently in different tasks. And so what I wanted us to leave that video with, the AI one, is I don't know what you guys hear about AI. I don't. I consume a lot of information about it. I grew up in the Bay Area. People talk about that all the time. And people talk about AI as if it reasons and thinks like we do. I'll come back to you. But it doesn't, for these very distinctive reasons. Now, is it possible that AI can get closer to us? Yes. I think it would be a chauvinistic position to say that we are inherently special because we're wet biological organisms. I don't think that's a really strong argument. But for now, there's a difference. And just highlighting that there is a difference and having some understanding that inputs and the way that our brain's structured and how that's different from AI is relatively important from a foundational level, from the base. Because when we start thinking about like from the bottom up, like what a child learns throughout its life, how amazing that process actually is to come with some knowledge of the world. AI doesn't come with knowledge of the world, right? It's fine-tuned for tasks that are just totally different than what human beings can do. So when you talk to ChatGPT and you like keep hitting it with fix this bug or write this better or do whatever, there's a reason it's not understanding you because it's not doesn't have the same human experience. Like think about the principles of learning. It doesn't have the same things that we come into the experience with. Terrence, you had something?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, couldn't you give an AI model the same inputs that you give a human? What's different?
Right.
Yeah.
As I was saying that, I was like, maybe I should use a better terminology here, but inputs, stimulus is not perceptually agnostic. So what that means is you're taking in light, you're seeing me, you're hearing my words, whatever. That's dependent on the context that you're in, right? So like we can imagine that the state, I'm trying to think of how to say this like simply. There's a lot of evidence in neuroscience and cognitive science in regards to perception that we don't view the world independently from, like we don't view the world objectively. From the very instant that light comes into our eyes and our brains and whatnot, we perceive that differently given our prior brain states. And then from there, there's this belief that the signal that goes into your brain then goes to another part of your brain, which then processes that information, which then goes to another, and then goes to another. So at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is we may live in the same world, but each one of us as human beings perceives it from the very beginning differently. So it's not exactly right to say that the inputs are different, but the way that we process the objective facts or inputs about the world is different. We don't live in a world where we can observe objectively. So I think it's more of a, your point is exactly right. For the purposes of this class, I think it's, you have to consolidate some information and generalize a little more. And I think it's useful to just think that we don't see the world the same way. Fundamentally, our relationship, it would be better to say our relationship with the inputs is different. I think that's a perfect way to, perfect bridge. I really appreciate that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I might ask a question after class, but can
Sure.
you have it like cycle back around, like reinforcement learning, to sort of change what the AI is like? Have the previous actions, previous states, change the AI's perception of the new inputs?
Sure, it could be different.
Okay.
But now the perception's different, but is that what we're doing? Or are you saying, like, can you update it such that eventually it models or maps cleanly to what we do?
Yeah, so like if we're constantly taking a new stimulus and then the output that we have is based on all those previous brain states that we've had, couldn't you have an AI that is constantly receiving stimulus and then it's like self-training on the stimulus it's already received?
What it sounds like you're saying is we get an information, we update, we get information in a particular way. Could we not have a model that is training and it has some ground truth about what we're doing, so then it updates in its learning, so then that way it more closely models what we do to the point where it like actually is? Not the scope of this class. I think yes. I think yes. But current AI systems, as we use them now, can't do that.
Okay.
Right. So theoretically, yes. I think that's a really interesting place to be research-wise, and that's where I want to be research-wise. But the foundational where we are now is just, it's radically different. But yes, yes, yes. Okay. Sorry, guys. So all of that's going to bridge into this idea of expertise. AI, cognition, part of that video was establishing this fact that, like, as we begin to understand the mind more, we're interested in how we can represent that in machines. As our technology improves, we start to think, oh, maybe we can represent, maybe we can model back and forth. We take information from how our brain works, we build machines. We build machines like ChatGPT, and now people everywhere are saying, oh, this is what the brain's doing. There's, goods and bads. But they cross-contaminate. And so we can take that information from the foundations and then apply it to something that we all engage with, which is this idea of expertise and what it means to actually develop the capacity to learn and be an expert. So hopefully by the end of this class, you'll know traditional versus, we'll just go through all these. You'll have a better idea of what we mean by expertise historically, how it's changed. We're going to present a model of expertise development that's a little more sophisticated than this basic idea of just learning and having command over some set of facts. And then we'll hopefully get to some questions here. So what do we think of when we hear the word expert or expertise?
Expert witness.
Huh?
Expert witness.
Expert witness. Okay, I like that. Anybody else? Expert. Who wants to be an expert? Okay, we have a few. And we have a lot of people that don't care. Why not? I'm more interested in the negative than the positive here. Did you say you wanted to be an expert? Okay. Wait, you did not want to be an expert?
I wasn't quite sure because I feel like expert to me has like a connotation of a very specific field. And so I more want to be able to navigate all the different facets
Sure. Okay. The word you want is polymath. Do you know what that word is?
Nope.
So like to be an expert in many things, to be able to navigate between different avenues. That sounds like what you're describing.
Not be an expert at everything, but just have the general understanding of the world to live in it.
Okay, I respect that. I respect that. Is that how other people feel that don't want to be experts? Just like I just want to get along. I just want to move in life, navigate how I want to navigate. Did you have a point?
Oh yeah, I was gonna say expert in what?
That's your choice. Do we think expertise is relegated to academic topics? No. Okay. So would it be fair to say that everybody wants to be expert at something in their life, even if it's not academic? Right? So if I ask the question again, who wants to be an expert for things that don't include academia? I'm going to assume we have more hands raised. Okay. I think that's a good place to start. One of our ideas are colloquial, so like layman's terms, how we deal with the idea of expertise is like somebody who understands a certain pocket of information to a degree that's like different than other people. It's like you have the ability to command knowledge or apply knowledge in ways that other people don't. And I think we're going to get that here. So I think the most important thing here is this idea of applying it to a specific task. What did we just cover that's related to specific tasks? Okay, what about it? I just want to hear the stupid general statement. We're going to bludgeon this to death. What is the point? What was the point with AI and then also showing like the child?
How it learns.
Right, so everything is like related to task demands. Okay, like the game of playing hide and seek is a task. There is a goal, there is an end state, there's progression through it. We do that from just like the very basics. We're going to strip away all of our ideas of thought, conception, whatever. Moving from behaviorism to cognitivism to even AI. We have goals. We have tasks. And it's not a coincidence that this definition comes up from those basic theories. Hello, hello. And here is the level of one's skills, knowledge, or ability relevant to that of. Let's skip that. That's not good. That was supposed to be a discussion that we don't need to have. But do we understand this idea of the definition being built off of those prior ideas of expertise? And so the traditional view of expertise development is that positive, systematic change that individuals go over time for the performance within a specific domain or field moves them towards expertise. And so from here, we're taking the same basic idea of you learn a bunch of facts about a thing and then you just apply them within a domain. Right? Does that make sense? Is that like generally how you've interacted with this word in the past, how you've been exposed to it? Just you learn a bunch of things and you apply it. You learn a bunch of things. You know more things than other people. You're an expert. Right? Okay. And so I guess the idea here is that like the task is represented by this maze where you have to exercise your cognitive abilities to try to make sense of the world, apply these facts, and then through some process, you end up coming out of some difficult task. Some people think, we can think of like a PhD as being the specific task for 5 years. You have to engage in the application of knowledge, the refinement of knowledge, to then eventually become an expert.
That maze is basically impossible to lose. Like, no matter which way you go, you can basically have a straight path out.
Is it?
Yeah, there's really only one decision.
That's actually hilarious. So I didn't put this slide together. So that's actually really funny. It makes me wonder whether there's like, here's me thinking on my feet. I wonder if like they put this slide here to say that there are multiple paths to expertise. That's not the point I was trying to make. Cole, I appreciate your observance, but we're going to forget like that didn't happen, and the idea is that there is a difficult task that you have to navigate. And maybe this is even representative of the real world, where I think this kind of like bridges into like where we want to go with this idea of expertise, where we think we have a narrow view of what it means to actually be an expert, but there's not. So maybe the point here is that there are multiple bridging paths, and our idea of expertise is too myopic, which means like too constrained and too small. We need to open up our field of vision here. And so from that position, okay, we know who this guy is, right? Cool, okay, very cool. I used to TA for this class, and the professor that I used to TA for would like ask every photo. And for the years that I've been here, the number of people who participate seeing these older photos gets lower and lower, and it's kind of sad. And so again, we're going to bludgeon this to death, but expertise is generic problem solving, knowledge-rich problem solving, multi-developmental process. So again, the idea is that we start here from this idea of expertise just being very basic, starting from these foundational elements of cognition. It has developed then to adding more information. So it's not just about solving tasks within a domain. It's having a sort of breadth or excessive amount of knowledge that allows you to navigate more nimbly, more efficiently, to have a better understanding of this generic problem. And then now we're going to eventually get into this idea of expertise as not being so constrained to a particular task, but being multidimensional, bringing in sets of information that might be separate or disparate, and then bringing them in together. Does anybody know who this is? No, it's a good guess. Yes.
Right?
Yeah, it is. So, first generation, I think we've bludgeoned this, stimulated by, I'm going to use that word just so you associate the word with. What did you say?
I don't even know who Galileo is really, but I knew that was him.
Oh my goodness, that's interesting. Stimulated by research in artificial intelligence. This begins in like the 1940s. From there, we end up getting intelligence tests, IQs, as people start to sort of figure out like, okay, what is it that machines can do versus what we can do? Can we systematize this to create tests and measures to understand like how smart people are? We know how smart a machine is. It can do the task. Can we predict how intelligent or expert somebody is by giving them measures to then understand their cognitive faculties that then make predictions about the world? And so that's where that sort of rose. And again, efficient and effective solution to generic problems. It's just like this idea that you're just a smart person. That's what we can imagine the initial ideas. It's just like, are you smart or are you not? Can you solve problems? Yes, and then we have discussed this as well. This oh, we don't want this. So this is the second generation. This is the first iteration of this idea of expertise, where we're going to integrate more rich information. So informed by research in information processing theory, this comes out of or is directly related to the cognitivist perspective. The cognitivist perspective is, again, that we take in stimulus information. It's all information because we want to say what it is without putting any labels on it. Just signals, information, and we develop a more robust view of the world by integrating that information, all those different symbols, all those different words, all those different images, into a more inclusive, overarching view of the world that then we can make actions in. So if we're thinking about it in terms of tasks, we're thinking about how the more accurate information we can get in, that's step one. Now the second step is how do we integrate that to then create or enact actions in the world, right? So like if you're an expert hide and seek player, you're going to be able to hopefully have a rich understanding of who you're playing against, have a rich understanding of the topography or the environment that you're in, and you're going to be able to predict, I see Joey's over here. Joey's a tall guy. He's also an industrious guy. Maybe he's going to go hide in the kitchen, and maybe he's going to hide somewhere where he can fit. Or maybe he's going to think that I know what he's going to do, and he's going to do this, and he's going to leave some tracks. You see the idea, like, just aggregating more information to have a more rich environment to then engage in. Right. And so this led to the development of systems and also the analysis of systems and games, tasks. And so the analysis of expertise and how we categorize people and their ability to utilize knowledge, again, related to these tasks. Does anybody see an issue with this, though? Like we've talked about humans and AI. Like what makes an AI brittle? I think this is the perfect point to bring this up.
The lack of generality, like the video says, you're creating these silos of intelligence, and once it is outside that, it doesn't know what to do.
Right. So if there's this idea, which some people have in cognitive science, I think it's relatively valid. If there's this idea that what we do is take information for specific tasks and learn about it, right? Like a kid learns how to play hide and seek, it might not know the rules of the game and it applies it. If you just take snapshots of this task and this task and this task and this task and this task, we kind of look similar to what the AI is doing, right? Kinda, because fundamentally we're able to transfer knowledge, right? I don't just learn about my mom. If I'm the kid again, I want to put myself in that. I want us all to put ourselves back in that perspective, the first person view of the child. If I have a representation in my head of my mother, right, when she's feeding me something, it would not be useful for me to forget all of that information when I play hide and seek, would it? If you saw me in Trader Joe's, which I have seen students in Trader Joe's, and it has been an awkward experience at times. Not for me, I don't care. But is it useful to treat me as a totally different person? I don't know, maybe if you want to not say hi, then like, yeah. But if we're going to have a conversation, is it useful to know who I am, to remember certain parts of the conversation? I hope this shouldn't be hard. The answer is, what's the answer? Is it useful?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Can somebody tell me why? Think about prediction. Why is that useful?
You know what you'll say next.
Right. If you come up to me and you say, "Hey, Mohammed, like, what's the expectation?"
We have an actual conversation.
Thank you. That makes me feel good that you have that view of me. But yes, like the idea is if you come say hi to me, like for you to make an accurate prediction of the world and what's going to happen, for you to be an agent in the world to like think and feel or whatever it is, you have to take that information from some previous experience and apply it. Otherwise, you might live in a world where you see me and you think, oh, that's a scary person. Maybe you do think that. That's fine. But you see that, and if that contrasts to what you previously have perceived, does that help you make sense of the world at that point in time? Does it? It helps you make sense of the world to not transfer?
No,
To transfer.
Yeah,
To transfer. Yes, okay. So to transfer is incredibly important. That's one thing. That's one person in Trader Joe's. Now imagine you had to go into a scenario every time with no information. Imagine you're just like plopped into a Trader Joe's for the first time. No prior experience. that sounds like hell. That sounds so scary. There are all of these things that are moving around, picking things up, looking at them. Maybe somebody's stealing something. Are they stealing? I don't even know what stealing is. It's just not useful, right? So when we look at a machine, do we think the machine is looking at the world like we are? Every time we put it in a task, if it's a game or whatever, it's just saying, okay, from the very beginning, it doesn't have the same emotional response. It doesn't have the same neurochemical response. It's not going to feel fear. It's just going to say, okay, I saw this person put a hand up, then they put their hand on this thing. What's the next predicted action?
How does it know what a person is?
It doesn't. That's the point. But just for this conversation. What's its prediction? I see this 7 times. What's going to happen? I see this 7 times. This is the 8th time. What's going to happen? I'm going to grab it. I'm going to pick it up, right? And then when I go and I talk to ChatGPT or whatever, and I say, what's this person going to do? What's ChatGPT going to say? Okay, but does it know what actually is happening here? In some sense, we can say superficially, it sees the features, my hands, it sees this object, I pick it up, sure. But does it have the same information that a human being would have? I think people get caught up on this idea of, because it's saying, using the same words that we're using, because it's doing something that I can't do, there's this level of, I see it as having expertise or having agency that it doesn't have. I'm kind of moving beyond this point here, but I think that's I think it's okay. Because I think this is more important for all of us moving into the future. There's a lot of information in the world. These machines are really good at taking that information and putting it into something that is predictive. And for the vast majority of time, if you just make the right prediction about a task, it's going to be useful, right? It's useful that ChatGPT can tell me what this is, and then I'm going to pick it up. But can ChatGPT, and the more information you have, the better it can be at prediction. But again, fundamentally, there's a difference here. There was one more point I wanted to make, but it eludes me now, and maybe we'll come back to it. But again, so expertise, coming back to the actual topic here, expertise was, we started to view expertise in relation to actual tasks. The issue with this in particular, this is why I brought this up. Just because you're really good at these tasks doesn't mean you're good at other things, right? Right? Do you think there's a correlation between your League of Legends ranking and your ability to, I was going to say public speak, but that probably does have a high negative correlation. Do you think that there's a correlation between being a good chess player and having good social intelligence?
No, there could be a correlation between anything.
Okay, right, yeah. Okay, but the words are and nothing, like, probability theory exists for a reason, right? It's like, to say that, like, that is a categorical error in terms of, that is a categorical error in terms of the influence that objects have in the world. So like if I say something has a very high correlation, via probability theory, I can say with some certainty that this will happen 90% of the time. If I say there's a very low correlation, then maybe it happens 1 out of 100 times. I can say they both have correlations, and I can group all those things together and say, okay, maybe we shouldn't examine it, or maybe this example is not useful. But I think that the basic premise where that comes from is like, yes, we need to be incredibly skeptical about everything and how we're relating. We have to make sure we're categorizing things as precisely as we can in as useful ways as we can. But yeah, okay, we'll move on to this point. Off of this point. But again, we can see how this definition in our modern times, it's quite clear why this doesn't work. And so then also, when people determined expertise, this is also a category error. So this bridges well. Expertise was relative to that of novices, which it's almost like an either or, a binary. You know, there's not a lot of like delineation. It's just like you're either an expert or you're not an expert, which is not useful at all in like any meaningful sense. I'm gonna skip through that. If anybody knows who this is, no Chinese philosophy students? I actually don't know who this is. I actually don't know. If anybody has like Google Lens, do you guys know what Google Lens is?
But it never works for me.
We could talk about that because maybe it's a. Maybe I'd be interested to know what you're looking at. Yeah, what does it say, Terrence?
I haven't gotten to it yet.
Oh, okay.
I'll let you know.
Okay, yeah, we'll let our expert AI systems help us. And so we see the issue, right? And so then we say, okay, if we want to give people this label as being more agentic or capable or able to solve problems within a domain or across different domains, who do we got?
Confucius?
Confucius, okay. I don't think I've ever seen a photo of Confucius before. Yeah, okay, anyways. So we see the issues from the prior generations of how people interpret expertise, and we try to integrate more information. So we're trying to bring in these ideas. Some of these ideas that I've been talking about have been social constructivist ideas where you learn from your environment, you integrate that information into a representation, which then transfers. So this idea of transfer. And then social cognitive theories, again, very similar to what we've been talking about. And now we start to think about what it actually means to be in the progression of developmental or expertise development. And we can't talk about the development of expertise or anything that requires our sort of agentic individual capacities without talking about motivation. So we've talked about goals, right, in this very nebulous way with artificial systems. You define the goals for them, or you define the preferred end state, if I'm going to run a simulation. But human beings, we also have goals, but we also have other variables that affect that. That includes motivation. If you're not motivated to do something, are you going to do it? Sometimes. This is interesting. If you're not motivated to do something, raise your hand. Will you still do it? This is very nebulous. I know this is very vague. I know. But just show of hands. Will you still do it generally? Okay, now the people that will not do it, please raise your hands. Okay, so
I guess everything is motivation. Like, what is, like, if
we will define it. We will define it. We will define it. Hold that thought. We will define it. Because I think what you're getting at is like everything is a task. Everything has an end state. Everything we might have some motivation, inkling, urge to complete something, right?
Is the very doing something a motivation? Like, does that express motivation? Like, if you're doing something, like, to do anything, you have to have the motivation to do it. Like, is everything a motivated state? Right? Like, any
Right.
task, there has to be. Like, we don't do something for no reason. Like, no matter what we do, we're not automated. So,
Well,
like,
okay. I think let's think about. I think this sort of like deep questioning is very useful. So from here, from this deep skepticism, which is where I normally operate too, so I do really appreciate it. How do we create a functional definition? Let's just do that right now. How do we create a functional definition of motivation? Cole's points are salient. They're good, right? For us to operationalize the idea of motivation. How do we use it? How can we create a set of definitions or a logic to then apply in some sort of scientific method? I will say, I think that's like a hard task, and for this, the point of time, I think you can add a lot of different structures here. Maybe we talk about like the idea of free will. Maybe we talk about the idea of motivation, but also the idea of wanting some particular outcome or goal. If somebody comes behind you and says, give me your wallet, and you tell me I had the motivation to give my wallet to that person, I'm going to say, I don't think that qualifies in my definition of motivation. Because I think my definition, my definition for, in this case, situated in this context, this task of defining our humanness, what undergirds this idea of motivation is normally like self-direction. That would be the base premise. Self-directed action, or whatnot. Now you could say self-directed action. Somebody gives you a direction, but like you still are self-directed. Like you're still making the decision: am I going to give it to this person or not? But I think like we want to exclude these. We want to exclude these examples or ideas of like being under duress. And so we can like talk about it more, but like the idea is just we have certain factors in our brain, whether it's our neurochemical responses, whether it's our ideas or concepts, and they feed into our willingness or not to stay in a program, to engage in certain activities, to play soccer, to go fight somebody in a boxing ring or whatever. There's motivational variables. And we'll get into these definitions a little more. And then, right, and so then, again, one of these points that we're trying to drive home here is that expertise should not just be relegated to like, you're either an expert or not. There's like any state progression, there's in-betweens, right? You're not, when you go on vacation, it's not like you are, or you go on a journey, it's not like you are not on a journey and then like you're at the end of the journey. It's like, those are two states. It's like, you're not an expert, and then suddenly you're an expert. There's a journey here. Like this should be fairly straightforward. Okay, whatever. So we have a functional model. Do we know who these people are? On the Epstein. He was on the Epstein list. You didn't know that? You gotta become more expert in your political.
Keep up on the Epstein list.
That's a way to frame it. Yeah. I actually don't know who this person is. Also, if somebody wants to be awesome and Google that person, is it? I want to see. I know Madame Curie. That's Madame Curie. Okay. Do you guys know who Madame Curie is? Anybody else? Got our two engineers over here. Yeah? Do you know who Madame Curie is? Vaguely? Okay, that's fine. I'll let you guys research who these people are afterwards. We are kind of running out of time. So we're going to introduce this model. It's the model of domain learning. It is supposed to help us chart our progress through the expertise learning cycle. This is a class about learning, so how do we actually instantiate that into something like knowledge development and learning, or expertise development. So this is fairly straightforward. We're going to present this model. It's going to show you how potentially you might change over time and some of the key explanatory and theoretical factors that influence that. And it should hopefully also serve as a framework to help you understand where you're at, whether you want to move into these different levels of expertise development, and whether they're useful to you or not. And obviously, hopefully everything in this class should have some impact in your life. If one of them could, that would be great. But anything else is a bonus. So the model of domain learning, here are the stages. So first we have this should be in each one of these three. I want to use the word quadrant, but I don't want to use the word quadrant because quad is 4. Does anybody know what it is? It's not, I want to say like quadrant, like 3 in French, but like we have 3 stages, 3 general stages. I would write this down in your journals. I think it's going to be important. One could imagine with the first learning demonstration, which is your midterm, that might come up. Who knows? I might have to talk to the instructor about that. So I want to walk through this step by step because I think it's like fundamentally important here. We have acclimation, which is the first third. We have competence, the second third, and proficiency in the final third. Does anybody know what this word means? To acclimate? To adjust, to get familiar with, right? That's our colloquial definition. That's going to be our operational definition here. What about competence? What does it mean to be competent? I heard ability, and then yes? Capable. Okay, perfect. So you are competent. Has anybody, I was going to ask, has anybody been told that they are incompetent before? But that's, I have. It's not a fun thing. But competence is this, just think about it as the general ability to do something. You are competent, you are capable. Proficiency. We use this word in our daily lives. What does it mean to be proficient? Well-adjusted. You're not just able to do something, but you do the thing at a higher level of efficiency, ability. I'm trying really hard not to use the word expertise, but we're going to use this proficiency quadrant as our definition of expertise. So you can, proficiency, you can put / expertise or expert. And so in each one of these, okay, so essentially this chart at the end of it's going to be this progression of where we are in expertise development from the beginning all the way to the end. And so each one of these 3 sections has an early, middle, and late stage. You could chop this up into like 100 different points, but we just break it up into 3 just because it's easier to read, right? Like this is just a question of what our metrics are going to be. Okay, so we're going to start populating this chart with like actual variables here. And so the first thing that matters in the development of expertise in the model of domain learning is subject matter knowledge and within the model of domain learning, there's going to be 3 facets that define the model. You have the knowledge of the subject matter. So this is just the facts. It is your level of interest and the strategic processing that you engage in. So subject matter knowledge is basically all the knowledge that an individual has in relation to the domain. There's really not much to change here, like not much for me to rephrase here. Like this is fairly specific. You should know this definition. All knowledge that an individual has relative to a specific domain or study. It says it in the name here, the subject matter and the knowledge related to that. And so within subject matter knowledge, we have 2 types. We have domain knowledge, and then we have the breadth of knowledge. So domain knowledge is the specific knowledge, like how deep you can go. I think that's the most accessible heuristic. And then the breadth is like just how much general information that you have. So for instance, I am doing a PhD in psychology. My domain knowledge of psychology is at a certain level, certain depth, but then I have a larger breadth of knowledge because of all of the information that's associated with psychology. So maybe I have information about machine learning or computer science or philosophy. That's more in terms of breadth as opposed to like expansive, as opposed to being deep. And then you have topic knowledge. Oh my God. I'm so sorry, guys. Domain knowledge is the breadth of knowledge. So like the wideness. Topic knowledge is specifically like how deep that knowledge is. I'm very sorry for making that mistake. Does that make sense? Yeah? Is that understandable? My sincerest apologies for that. That's embarrassing. Right. So how are we going to represent that in this model of domain learning? Domain knowledge at the beginning, so like your general sense of the field, your general sense of the topic, your general understanding starts very low. But as you progress in the development of your expertise, your general understanding of the domain should be higher and higher and higher. When I first started learning about psychology, I didn't know a lot, like everybody, right? I came with my base cognitive faculties, but then as I learned more about the domain, I learned more and more and more. I have general knowledge. And then we have topic knowledge, which is information about the specifics within the domain. Do we all understand what we mean by domain and topic here? I know I introduced that in a very haphazard and unprofessional way. My apologies. But the idea here is that this is like the topic and all of its related information, and then this is the specific topic. Does that make sense? So does anybody have an idea as to why domain knowledge is higher? Like quantitatively, the amount of domain knowledge is higher than the amount of topic knowledge? Any?
Domain is more broad.
Mm-hmm. Is that your response to the question?
No, sorry, I'm so.
It could be.
Process, like okay, so I would say domain is higher because like it's more broad knowledge, so you're always constantly learning and developing skills. So you come in with a higher domain knowledge and a relatively lower topic knowledge.
Right. And then Nate, and then Terrence.
Isn't like domain knowledge like part of topic knowledge? So, and then like a bit added extra.
Domain knowledge is part of topic knowledge. I think the sense, like what you're getting at, is represented the other way. So like, I think it's just a definitional distinction. So like, we want to look at domain as like the domain of psychology, but the specific topic that I'm interested in is the topic of educational psychology. So like, the domain is like the broader thing, and then topic is like a subset of that. Does that make sense? And then were you going to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the topic is the subset of the domain, so it makes sense that the domain is higher than the topic.
Right. Does that make sense to everybody? Just want to make sure it's like super clear. So like, Jesus. So like, domain, right, is this larger category. So like, the domain might include like cognitive, psychology. This is like domain of psychology. Might include ed psych. So I write in cursive, people. I'm sorry if you can't understand, but I won't change. And then maybe just like clinical psych. Let's just imagine that there are three. Let's imagine there's just like three different topics within this domain. It's a lot bigger, but like domain of psychology, within it there are the topics of cognitive psychology, ed psych, whatever. So this is like topic 3. This is topic 1, topic 2, topic 1. Does that make sense, right? And so like when you learn about this particular topic here, right, there's a relationship between the information here. There's also a relationship between the information here, right? And so we see that this web of knowledge is deeply connected. So for me to learn about educational psychology, I have to know information about cognitive psychology or clinical psych. It feeds into here, and it feeds into the domain as well. It like influences it. Does that make sense? Just think about it like a subset. And then topic knowledge, similar. But right, the points that we're just making. And so here we have two types of interest. These are going to be the next two lines in our chart. You have individual or personal interest, which just means you have this like, I don't want to use the word innate because we already used that in a very specific sense with there being innate structures of the mind. We could say that that's related. We could say that like your inherent structure, the information that you are interested in, that you've been exposed to, leads to this innate interest in a particular thing. Like I remember being 4 years old and seeing a violin and being like, oh my God, that is the coolest thing ever. And it's like, did I watch a movie with a cool violinist? Maybe. Was that just an innate response? I don't know. But we do know that there was an individual interest. Like you all have things in your life where you're just interested in it. You like it, maybe, and we can see how those interests, we might, even if we can't think about it, like if we look on our TikTok algorithms, I'm sure our algorithms are tuned to our personal interest or whatever it is. So that might be a good, if you're unsure about what your interests are, look at your algorithm, see what's being served to you. And then we have situational interest. Situational interest is your interest when you are in a context that sort of forces it or makes you do it. So for instance, if you did not have to be here for a grade or you were not paying money, there's 29 people in this class, maybe 3 people, and maybe that's being very generous, would be interested in the topic that we're talking about. Maybe it's 0, I don't know. Let's just go with 3. For the rest of the 27, you are paying attention to this because you are situationally interested. We can like break down this this label later. I think I have issues with how they use the term interest because how can you actually be interested in a thing when you're not, right? This seems kind of like dichotomous to me. Obviously, it makes sense in the way, if we think about it in terms of attention. Either you have a vested interest, and so you have like high attention that's like internally directed, or you have situational interest, which means that you're devoting your attention only because of the context that you're in. And so how do we think this represents? Situational interest starts very high because you don't know that the thing exists, right? We live in a material world. I am a material girl. Nobody likes Madonna here. That's Madonna, right? Here I am asking a bunch of 20-year-olds if they know Madonna songs. Everybody knows ABBA, right? Oh, yeah. So situational interest starts really high because you don't have prior exposure to it. It's hard to think about a thing without knowing that it exists, without knowing the intricacies of it. But as you progress in your development, you don't need the thing to be presented to you to be as interested, generally speaking. Again, this model is for like general expertise development. People might have different positions, starting positions, but this is in aggregate what we see across most people. And so then individual interest, so like the interest that is naturally occurring, the sort of thought, like, oh, I'm just thinking about this thing because I like it, or I'm going to go do this thing because I enjoy it, generally starts lower. But as you get more exposure to it, as you move forward, as you progress from acclimation to competence to proficiency, you end up having an increase in the sort of, you might think about it in terms of how much you care about it, just how much you generally think about it. And you need less of the context to help guide your interest. And so the last one that we'll cover today is strategic processing. And so there are two types: surface level strategies and deep processing level strategies. Does this remind us of anything that we've covered in this class? Nice. Which one? Somebody else. Which one maps to surface level strategies? Okay, information management. I'm managing the information. That's an information management. And I'm generally applying surface level strategies. Here, the surface level strategies are slightly different. I guess what I would like to say more clearly is because we don't know a lot about the information, it's hard for us to integrate it deeply into our knowledge base. We have to use surface level strategies. We have to kind of be like an AI and just look at the outside features. We don't really know how things are working behind the hood or whatnot. We can't integrate this information to have a better understanding. But deep processing strategies is related to knowledge building, where we're able to play with the information. We're able to deal with it more fluidly or nimbly. And so like the idea is, if you're learning math for the first time and somebody tells you like, tell me what the quadratic equation means, like maybe you'll just like think of the song, y equals negative b plus or minus radical, was it 2a, what is it, what is, I don't remember.
Square root of b squared.
Square root, yes, yes, yes. And so I should have brought something up that I actually remember. But like the idea is you're just going to like recite the information. But if you actually have engaged in deep processing, the fact that I can't remember might seem ludicrous to you because you know what every variable means, how it relates to the larger context that it comes in when it's actually applied. And so you've personalized it through your experience. And so the last thing here is we can see that your use of surface level strategies at the beginning of expertise development is really high. Because again, you don't come pre-programmed with that information. Deep processing strategies is incredibly low as well. But as you progress, your use of surface level strategies drops down. It never leaves. You never stop using heuristics. You never stop using mental shortcuts. You never stop using these strategies. You just use them a lot less. And your ability to use deep processing strategies increases. And so this is what this final chart should look like. Now, there's lots of questions here about whether we think this accurately represents us. Next week, I will print out this and bring everybody some papers, because what we'll do next week is we will ask where we think we fall on this chart and why. So if you have any questions or concerns about this in particular, we'll start next class with this and do an activity with that. Thanks for being here, everybody. I really appreciate it.